All right. Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another live stream right here on Free Will Photos. Man, today we are going to be looking at focus stacking inside of ON1 Photo Raw, as well as going over a few things inside of Affinity Photo, just to do a comparison and why you would choose one software over the other. So hopefully you guys are all doing great. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the lessons. Now, obviously, you can leave comments in the comment section below, and I will answer those as we're on the live stream. And if you're watching this post live stream, then you can still leave comments, and I will answer those as I get time to get into the comments. So yeah, let's go ahead and start talking about focus stacking. Now, I don't have any slides today, mostly because I felt that I think I should just talk about this stuff and then show you. But I do have my notes, which are on this second monitor. So as I'm looking over here, I'm really just looking at my notes. Please don't hold that against me. Actually, what I'll do is I will bring my notes right here in front of the camera. That way I can read through those real quick. All right, so let's go ahead and go over an overview of what focus stacking really is. Very simply, and you're going to see it in the email or in the emails. You're going to see it in the examples that I have. But essentially what you're going to do is take a series of photos of an image. And you typically do this with a very, very low aperture or f-stop, which means your field or your focal plane is really, really narrow. And from the front to the back of the image, you want to make sure that everything is in focus. But if you were to take that in one picture, you would still have most of that image out of focus, right? So then you would say, oh, well, I'll just jump my f-stop up. Well, maybe you don't have enough light. So you have to keep your aperture down low, which then means that you're going to have to stack those images because you have to keep your aperture down low. But even with a very, very high f-stop, if you're doing macro photography, which is typically where focus stacking lives, a lot of macro photographers, they use the focus stacking technique. This is typically done because the object that they're photographing is so small that even with a super high f-stop and as close as they are, their depth of field, even though it says maybe f11 or f16, they're really getting the equivalent working distance of 5.6. And that's not going to give them, obviously enough depth of field. So that's where focus stacking comes in. I promise you, or at least I hope, it will make sense by the time that we get into the examples. Now, that's kind of how it works and when you would actually use it. So I've already knocked out those items on my notes here. So what will you need to make a focus stack? Well, obviously you're going to need a camera, and right here I have my EOS R6, and I've been using this a lot, and then on the camera right now is the RF to EF adapter with a Tokina 100 millimeter f2.8 macro lens. Now, this is important because what you really want to be able to see, and I hope you guys can see that there, is the little focus meter up, or not the focus meter. I forgot what this is called, but nonetheless, it's important to know that because as you are making adjustments in manual, you want to make sure that you're making the correct adjustments. So highly recommend that you get a macro lens, but you don't need one for focus stacking. I just find that it works the best in macro photography for my own personal taste, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The next thing that you're going to need is a light. Now, for all of the examples, I use continuous lighting. Now, I did not use this, but in the past, I have used this LED light, which I got off of Amazon. I want to say it came in a pack of 3, and they were like $50. It wasn't anything over the top, crazy expensive, but these really do come in handy. So if you need something, I recommend that you get a LED light continuous. You can do photo stacking with a flash, but depending on how much power you need based off of your settings on your camera, which we'll get into in a second, it can potentially slow down your workflow waiting for the flash to recharge or be ready to fire again. Whereas continuous light, you can just run this and it'll be perfectly fine. As long as your battery, or if you plug it into a wall, which is typically how I use it, then you'll be all right. And then you're gonna need something to put it on. This is a Gorillapod that I bought for a camera of mine, but you can put it on any sort of tripod. In fact, those come with like this little adapter that can go onto a light stand. So you can figure out a way. And worst case scenario, you prop it up against some books, and there you go. Now you have your light standing up. The next thing that you're going to need, and I highly recommend everyone has, which I think most of you do, and it's another tripod. I don't know why I had to put this on the stream, but if you are like, I have no idea. If you're like, I have no idea what I need, then yeah, you absolutely want a tripod. So camera, lens, obviously you need those just to take pictures, but the type of lens, you can do focus stacks with other lens, such as a 50 millimeter or 35 millimeter. The challenge there is, typically if you don't need to focus stack people. I hope not. Unless, there's a person that's standing like right in front of you and you want to be able to get a group shot, maybe it'll be beneficial to do a focus stack. But I think that there's some better ways of getting group shots with everyone being in focus. But I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below if that's something you would use it for, is group shots, or if it's something that you have used it for. Now, so camera, lens, tripod, light. Those are the main things that you need. Now, if you're going to get like super detailed into macro photography, the next item that you'll probably need is a focusing rail. Now, I don't get much use out of this focusing rail. These are fairly inexpensive. I don't get much use out of the focusing rail, but what it does is it allows you to adjust your entire camera on the focal plane based off of what you have going on. So could be helpful. I don't know if it is or isn't. That's something for you. I have not used it, and I'll let you see the results here in a second of what I get with the technique that I use primarily. Now, in order to focus stack, you must have a piece of software. The cool thing is ON1 Photo Raw does have a focus stack capability built into the software. So if you are using ON1 Photo Raw, you're going to be good to go. If you're using Photoshop or Affinity Photo, they both also have focus stacking modules, if you will, or the capability to focus stack as well. So depending on what software you're using, I think you're going to be okay and you're going to have what you need. With that being said, there are some limitations to all 3 software. All right. Really, you're limited. There's also a third-party software called Helicon Focus or something like that. That's something, I recommend you Google if you're interested. But moral of the story, this particular software is something I've never used. I know that it's almost like the industry standard when it comes to focus stacking, but not going to get into that because we're here to see how ON1 deals with focus stacking today. And then we already went over the hardware. Now, let's go ahead and talk about capturing the photos. The very first thing that I recommend you do is you put your camera on manual settings, manual shooting. Don't go into one of the semi-manual modes. Excuse me, let me get a sip of coffee. All right, so I don't recommend that you go into a semi-manual mode simply because it's going to change your exposure through the image, or at least throughout the image range. And I don't know if that's something that you're going to want, or I know that's not something that you're going to want. So, or most likely, I don't know, maybe you will. But moral of the story, put your camera on manual mode, bring your ISO down as low as it can go to 100. And because you're going to be on a tripod, you don't have to worry about the shutter speed because you can put that all the way down to 1 second or 3 seconds or whatever it takes in order for your exposure to come out. Where you really want to vary with your, like what you want to set first is going to be your aperture. Your aperture should be at one constant, at whatever setting. So if you decide to shoot at f2.8 or f1.8 if your lens goes down that low, then put it at f whatever and then set your shutter speed to give you the proper exposure. You want to adjust your shutter speed to get your exposure. You don't want to adjust your aperture to get your exposure. You want your aperture to really just focus on what do I want to be in super fine detail sharpness. Now, the reason why I also recommend you using a lower aperture as opposed to a higher aperture is the lower the aperture, obviously the more images you're going to have to take to get the entire focal range that you want. However, you can do micro adjustments for your focal range, and that's going to yield some of the better results. All right. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the actual process of capturing. One, you can use move the auto focusing point on your camera. What that means is as you are taking the photo, you focus either at the very back of your subject or you focus at the very front of your subject. Now, however you want to do that, if this is left to right, top to bottom, bottom to top, it doesn't really matter. I just recommend that you choose a direction and you only go in that direction. And the reason for that is you can slowly make those increments. I also recommend you turn on the rule of thirds or your grid on your camera if it has it. And if you have instead of the rule of thirds, I think it's the 9x9, whatever, it gives you like 4 horizontal lines or whatever. That's going to help you out a lot because it's going to give you a line that you can follow as you move your autofocus point up in the focal range. Now, if you're using a DSLR for this, I don't recommend this method on a DSLR because most DSLRs, they don't have when you move the autofocus point, it doesn't always work out the way that you would expect it to, it definitely doesn't work out the way that it works on a mirrorless camera. So I don't recommend this method. I recommend a different method if you're using DSLR. All right, that's enough on that. Automated focus bracketing built into some cameras. Now, on the EOS R, I have a automated focus bracketing opportunity to use on my camera. That's what I primarily use to capture the images that I'm going to be showing you in the focus stack today. That works out great because you just set a number of images, and as long as you choose either, I always start from the bottom. I've found that works the best with my camera. Your camera may work different. but you can choose how much you want that to adjust on your autofocus range, and it'll literally just go from the very front part that you set as the initial autofocus point all the way back to the number of images that you ask it to shoot. Obviously, if you set your increment to be much wider, you're going to jump a lot further down that focus path, as opposed to if you make it more narrow, it's going to take more images to get to that entire focus, to the end of the focus path. So you got to mess around with that, but you get to choose how far back into the focus path the camera captures by selecting the number of images you want it to photograph. So hopefully that made sense. I can't really demonstrate that in today's live stream. However, if that's something you're interested in, let me know, and I will make a dedicated video of using the EOS R system, at least on the R6, the focus bracketing systems, just so you can see what I'm talking about and see it in real time. So then the next thing is going to be manual focus. Now, this is what I recommend for any DSLR shooter. All right, you put your camera on manual focus, and I'll go ahead and do that here. All right, so you put your camera on manual focus, and I'll see if I can get this into there we go. All right, so while your camera is on manual focus, what you want to do is just slowly make incremental changes. Now, there's a glare on the rangefinder here, or the focal distance, but as you can see, as I turn this particular ring, I get these little notches, and all I need to do is move my focal range as much as whatever my increments are, and very slowly I work all the way through the entire focal range until I have as many pictures as I think I need for my subject to be completely in focus. Now, with this, I recommend that you go a little bit further, have a higher f-stop, just because it's not an exact science, and you will jump some focal planes. It's always good to have a larger focal plane to work with in manual mode, just to ensure that you did capture sharpness throughout the entire subject. That's just my recommendation. Let me know again in the comments below if that's something that you have struggled with in the past and you just want to see, or let me know if that makes sense, or if you have a better method of doing the manual focus mode. Okay. Now, again, you are hitting the shutter button every single time. So my recommendation is to use some sort of shutter release, so you're not like jerking the camera, or as I personally do, is I use the 2-second timer on my camera. That allows the camera to kind of rest and then fire the shot. And I do this with any bracketed shot, be it HDR, as long as I'm on a tripod. I don't do it if I'm handheld, but on a tripod, I do the 2-second timer. But for focus stacking, even when I'm using the automated system, I just hit the button and it goes like a charm. Now, the last one is focusing rail, but I'm not going to get into focusing rails because I don't think that it really makes too big of a difference. So now comes the part that everyone has come to the live stream for. So I'm going to go ahead and transition onto my computer so we can start looking at some stuff here, some merges. Now, obviously, one thing that I failed to mention during our conversation, just a second ago, is you will get a lot of photos. I think that was kind of inferred. As you can see in this one folder, I have 1,192 images. All right. And that's simply because the focal plane is moving further and further back. So what I want to do is show you the importing of those images. I took a series of photos just a second ago, literally right before this live stream started. So I'm going to hit import device because my SD card is already inside of my computer. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like when you get these series of images on your computer. So obviously you're going to be greeted with this. And I took a 90 photo series. This is literally one capture. All right. Using the autofocus bracketing feature on my camera, I took 90 different images, or I guess the camera did. I just hit the button and sat back and let it go. And I'll show you the settings here. All right. Once I get these imported. But moral of the story, what you're going to do is normal saving. Now, I personally just throw them all into this one folder, and then I go through and make a new folder. But since I know that, and I only do that when I have like multiple series, right? So say there's 4 subjects that I took photos of, and each of those had a 90 series or a 90 image series. Then I just drop all of them into one folder, and then I go through and manually make subfolders. But since this is only one series, I'm just going to hit new folder, and this is a Lego skateboard. I borrowed this from my kids many years ago, and I guess I just never gave it back. My youngest daughter found it on my desk, and I told her it's mine. So I'm still holding on to it. All right. And focus bracketing still life, that's fine. And I'm not going to worry about any of those other things. I'm just going to go ahead and hit import. So you can see all of these images, they start to import. And just note that each of these images, I'm going to try and zoom in here a little bit, make them bigger. You see I started my focal plane right here, right? And then if you look just a little bit further, let's find a more a further down photo. As you can see, this lightning bolt on the skateboard, that starts to become more apparent. Now, I did not get the entire skateboard now that I'm looking at the, or at least it didn't look like I got the entire skateboard. I don't know. I guess all the photos aren't in. I'm only at 51, so there's at least another 40 or 39 images after this one, and it looks like I'm about halfway there. I will say that this is a little bit of a guessing game when it comes to getting your photos, like getting the entire subject in focus at some point. But all of these images are in, and these are raw images. So that's another thing that, you got to be prepared for. So yeah, it looks like I just missed the tail end of the skateboard, but that's fine for today's purposes. I'm not going to make a big deal about this. All right. So now that I have all of my images in, let's go ahead and try and merge these inside of ON1. So what I want you to do is, and I did tell you I was going to show you the settings. So if you look over here, let me make this a little bit larger. And I'll get rid of my face because you don't need to see me. All right. And then we'll just hide that to make it a little bit better to see. I wish I could make this a little bit larger, but as you can see, I was at ISO 100. This was at ½ of a second exposure, and then 2.8 at the aperture. All right. So each one of these was at a ½ a second, right? So 2 images made 1 second. You can only imagine how long this took for 90 images to go, right? You can do the math on that. I'm not going to do public math because I will fail, probably get the wrong answer. And then that's embarrassing. Now, obviously, in order to stack images, you need multiple images. So holding down the shift key, you can click and there's 3 images. And if you look over here on the right hand side, it says focus. Now, I took 90 images, so I want to merge 90 images, right? Because why would I not want 90 images in my merge? So I hold down shift, click there, and it doesn't look like it wants to let me merge my 90 photos. ON1, why won't you let me merge my 90 photos? So I right click, and you can typically find create focus stack. Oh, look, there it is. So I'm going to go ahead and click it. Oh no. And then I get this this little message here. It says too many photos for focus stack creation. The maximum number of photos for focus stack creation is 14. Please deselect some photos and try again. So this is one of the biggest problems that I have with focus stacking inside of ON1. Even though it has the feature, this is the detriment for all people trying to focus stack inside of ON1, is the fact that you only get 14 images. I don't know, unless you're focus stacking something that's really large, you know, like a tree, something that doesn't need a whole lot of images to stack, but you are limited to 14. So let me show you what 14 images looks like with something this small, just to give a point of reference, right? So we'll find image number 14, which is right here. Hold shift, click. So this is going to let me create the focus stack. I'm going to go ahead and click it, and we are going to ON1's going to do its thing and do what it normally does with generating stuff. And I recommend that you have some coffee, because spoiler alert, or something to kind of pass your time, because this is as exciting as watching paint dry. But with that being said, ON1 takes a very, very long time to render the final product once you get done with this screen. But we're going to look at the focus stacking module here once it pops up. Starting off on the far left, you have align photos. That's very self-explanatory. I highly recommend you check that block, because it's important. Align photos is important. And then you have layered results. This is important because you're going to get a layer mask inside of ON1. Now, in my testing, turning off the layered results only speeds up the photo processing a little bit. Now, I'm going to show you both ways today because but I really do recommend that you go and experiment with this yourself. Then the next thing is, how do you want ON1 to open it? Do you want it to open in the develop module? Do you want to go straight to effects, or do you want to return to browse? Because this is a raw photo and it's going to merge it into a ON1 photo or on photo template, still preserving a lot of or all of your raw images, right? Because it's just consolidating and stacking them into layers. You're going to have access to each one of those images as a raw file. So, all 14 layers. And maybe that's the reason why ON1 has it limited to 14, just because it's like, look, man, if I go beyond 14, your computer's going to explode. I don't know. Next thing is depth of field. Now, this is really cool. Right now, it's at the maximum depth of field. Now, with 14 images, I feel like you get a little duped here, because as you can see, this is showing, let me make sure all 14 are checked. Oh, nope, they got a few that aren't checked. Probably because ON1 thinks they're like duplicate. But I'm going to check all 14, because if I only get 14, I want all 14 to be checked. All right. So from this point to this point, that's all I'm getting as far as my focal plane. Now, if I move this back, you should start to see the front of the skateboard, which it's really hard to see with 14 with such minor incremental changes with the photos. But the depth of field, it literally, the left side, if you pull this to the right, you're going to lower the depth of field from the front. And I guess this is in focus. So let's take a look at that. And it does take a little bit of time to process. So it took this a little bit out of focus. And then obviously you can pull it in from the back if you don't want anything back there focus. It makes more sense when you have something that has a deeper depth of field to begin with. But because this is so shallow, we're not seeing much. The next thing is going to be despeckle. Now, we'll see this come into play with a later image. I don't see any speckles really. Let me zoom in here. And you'll know a speckle when you see it because it just looks like weird. And it looks like, okay. So here's a clear variance for the speckle. What's happening here is at some point during the merge, ON1 figured that this shouldn't be in focus because, or one of the photos had this area right here, which is kind of hard to see. I'll move the little hand out of the way. But when you test this on your own images, you'll notice it. What happened is ON1 realized, hey, you know what? This area that's in focus on one of the images, it doesn't actually look good. So I'm going to blur it out. Now, despeckle is your way of really trying to get rid of those things. As you can see, there's a larger gap down here at the bottom. And as I pull this up, that gap goes away, right? That's what despeckle does. It doesn't look like it's doing a whole lot here just because it's a very narrow focal plane, but there are some speckles that were apparently on the top here. The variation between out of focus to in focus here, it didn't transition very well. So the despeckle is really just trying to smooth out all of those areas. And it makes sense because you want to make sure that you have the smoothest transition as you are going through your despeckling or your focus stack. So we'll leave despeckle up on this particular case. Now the threshold. The threshold is going to say at what point in this depth of field do you want these at what point do you want to start to blend these images, right? Again, ON1, it's hard to see in this photo, and it's really hard to see in a lot of photos unless you have a pretty deep depth of field to begin with. But as you can see, it kind of blends in these. The further I pull this up, the less despeckling or speckling that you're going to see there. You can see that there's a weird little transition there. So as I pull this down, watch that transition. You can see that it goes further back with this blending. But as I pull this up, it comes further up. So the threshold is really at what point do we start to blend in the blurry background with the in focus. And then sensitivity is just how sensitive is that threshold to finding the blurry areas. All right. So if you crank up the sensitivity and pull down your threshold, you should start to see these more blotty lines, right? So threshold and sensitivity need to be used together in order to make the smoothest transition. Because if I pull sensitivity all the way down, you're going to see that this really smoothens out. But if I pull it all the way up, you're going to start to, well, I guess if I pull it all the way up, it smooths out all the way with the exception of that one little area right there. And, you know, it's really hard to tell that that's even there, especially when you zoom out. So sometimes sensitivity is what you want all the way up. Sometimes it's not. You just got to play around with it. Then you got cancel and then save, which we'll click here in a second. Now down below, you get to select the images that makes the photo stack. By clicking the little circle or the check mark in there, that's going to show you what images you will be able to stack. And then to the right of that, it shows you the focal length. All right. or the amount of, not the focal length, that's not what it is. This is the amount of space that's actually in focus. Since I did not move the camera or anything of that sort, a lot of these are going to be the same until, well, I guess all of these are going to be the same because I had it on such a narrow processing. And I'll show you here in a second what to do with a larger one. But moral of the story, you'll see this jump up, and you want to get a good variation from a low number all the way up to a high number on the right hand side. And then, maybe even divide that by 13 or 14, just so that way, like, okay, this is the increment that I need to get in order to process a fully in focus image inside of ON1. But again, I'm not going to do the math because that gets way too technical. Just know that you can do a little bit of math to figure out how many images you need. Well, I guess you're already limited to 14. How large your intervals need to be in order to get the entire subject in focus and then still be able to merge it inside of ON1. So let's go ahead and hit save. And this is where it takes some time. ON1 really does take some time. So I highly recommend you get a cup of coffee. This is a great time for a bathroom break. Whatever it is that, you want to do that isn't sitting here, because this does take a little bit of time. Not so much that it can't be done on a live stream. And the next time that I come into this focus stacking module inside of ON1, I'm going to use uncheck the layered results, uncheck this little blue thing right here. So that way you can see how long it takes to render without the mask being produced as a layer. And then it just merges it into a stamp visible layer or a merge all layer type thing. So now it's starting to save and it's rendering just a little bit. I'm going to grab a sip of coffee because I'm sure you guys don't want to hear me ramble, but now would be a good time. If you got any comments or questions or just want to say what's up and hello, go ahead and drop those in the comment section as we wait for this particular thing to load up. So I'm drinking coffee now. Okay, well, yeah, and understand that this is normal. Now, I am on a M1 Mac Mini with 16 gigabytes of RAM, so in theory, this should work pretty quick. I know that there's still, I believe ON1 has been optimized for the M1, but, that's neither here nor there. It looks like it's almost done. No, it has to do the layers. Oh, the layers. So I just continue waiting, and eventually this will grow into, this will move us over into the develop module. Like I said, this does take time. This is not I don't know what to say. This is not an issue with ON1, like my computer or whatever. It just takes time for it to figure out how to render all of these images. The less images, obviously, the faster it goes. But I'm using all 14 just to show you what it would do. And these are 20 megabyte raw files. Straight out of the Canon EOS R. This probably goes a little bit faster. EOS R6. This probably goes a little bit faster with a JPEG, just because there's less information in the photo. And as you can see, this is not a very good focus stacked image. It actually looks blurry. Now, this is just the fast preview. If you look down here in the bottom right, the Lego skateboard image is still building. And I know that it's still building, one, because of this, but two, because I don't see my layer mask. And as you can see, there are 14 layers. It won't even let me scroll down. But there are 14 layers of raw images here. This is a challenge that you're going to run into with any sort of composite image. Now, oh, there goes my layer mask. So that means it's probably done, but it still looks extremely, extremely blurry. So for something that's supposed to make a photo merge stack, it doesn't look very sharp. All right. Now, again, I did this intentionally to show you that ON1 does give you individual layers, and look at how it does the blending. Now, there are some ways of purifying and correcting the blending. As you can see, those are some very jagged lines. Now, one of the best ways of fixing what ON1 does, and this is why I recommend you open it in layers, is you pull up on your feather. All right. Now, as you can see, that starts to smooth out those edges where that focus was. Now, if I hit O, you're not going to see a drastic difference, but it does get a little bit sharper right there. And you literally will have to do this for each one of these images, but being able to adjust the feather just a little bit, you don't have to do a whole lot of changing to that. It will help with the transitions that are right here, or the transition from blurry to in focus. Now, I don't really care for this portion right here to be in focus. And I think this is the image that has that. Uh-oh. I did not mean to hit reset. I want to view the mask. Yeah. So, again, you can just come in here and correct all of this. And I'm just going to paint black over, or paint out all of this on the mask, so that way it's not in focus. All right. Now, again, this is something that you will have to work on for yourself, because it looks like there's even more that's in focus here. But I think you kind of get the point there, right? And when you're done, you click on the very top image, and then you right click and you hit new stamped layer. I don't recommend merge visible, just because as soon as you merge the layers, you're going to lose the ability to edit the layer mask and then make a new stamp layer. So I always recommend a new stamp layer. This is going to give you an image of, if you're familiar with the compositing inside of ON1 Photo Raw, it's going to give you an image with a focus stack of just the images, merging all of those masks into one image that you can edit as you see fit. Now, it does take a little bit of time. Again, this is going to really, really be slow. So just be patient with that. Now, because I want to show you the difference, because obviously you're limited to 14 images inside of ON1 Photo Raw. However, we're going to go over to Affinity Photo. Now, there's a photo that I merged earlier this morning, which I think is kind of cool. But in Affinity Photo, and I'm going to go through this fairly quick, but I do want to show the differences. I'm going to hit New Focus Merge, and I'm going to hit Add. Now, I don't recommend you try and send photos over from ON1 into Affinity Photo, unless of course you edited those. Unless of course you edited those images and you are ready to process them inside of Affinity Photo You know, if they were raw images, you export it to TIFF or something like that. That's fine. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on Lego Skateboard, and I'm just selecting the raw images. And then I'm going to scroll down all the way to number 90, which is right here. And I'm just going to hit open. All right. I have not done any edit to these images. I just want you to watch how fast Affinity Photo works. So I'm going to hit OK. And it opens up the image, the first image at least, or one of the images. And it starts to do the align merge sources, right? I didn't have to check a block in order for Affinity Photo to align the photos, and it's going through all 90 of those images, and it's just lining them up, right? This, I believe, is the part that takes the longest inside of Affinity Photo, and we're just going to keep on waiting. I promise you, Affinity Photo goes way faster than ON1. And it could just be because I'm streaming and the software doesn't like to work the way that it's supposed to work whenever someone's trying to show someone how to use the software. Typically, me, when I'm trying to show someone how to use the software. But it is going to speed up here as soon as it gets going. Any second now. All right. But again, if you have questions, comments, please drop those in the comment section. And I'll be more than happy to answer those as we wait on the software to do its thing. Now, I have merged 90 images before. I actually merged 100 plus images. I think it was like 140 images, and it did not take this long. So I have to credit this to the live stream because I was not recording my screen when I did this. But neither here nor there. It's eventually going to go. And when it does, oh boy. Oh boy. But because I don't want to waste anyone's time, I'll go ahead and tell you some of the negatives about using Affinity Photo. The first challenge that you're going to run into with Affinity Photo is there are no options, right? I forgot the name of the company that makes this program, but they wanted to make it simple. So they didn't give you an option to choose to align your layers or not. It just does it for you automatically. And then they also don't give you an opportunity to edit any of the layer masks that Affinity Photo creates. At some point, once it gets through the align, merge sources and all that good stuff, you will see, and it looks like ON1 just got done merging some photos. So maybe that's what happened. Because I was using ON1 to finish making that stamped layer. Sorry. Because I was using ON1 to make that stamp layer, maybe it was slowing it down because it looks like it's starting to move a little bit faster now. But nonetheless, Affinity Photo doesn't give you masks to work with as you get inside of ON1 or even inside of Photoshop. I remember my first bracketed images actually came out of Photoshop, and I really enjoyed using Photoshop for my bracketed images. And when I got done making those images, I realized like, oh yeah, and I would group them all into one thing and then probably put a mask over that just so I can control that depth of field, like what ON1 gives you with that slider I was trying to demonstrate that didn't work out that well. That's what I would group them for, and then I would control my depth of field either with a gradient mask or something else, radial filter, radial tool, and then blurring that particular the outline of it. So Those are obviously all options. Now, I'm just going to check ON1, see if I can. So it made the stamped layer as I was explaining earlier. And you can come in here now, use whatever filters inside of effects, and it will apply to one image. So if I wanted to blur that one little line, I can easily click there, hit blur. I don't know what's going on. Is Affinity Photo moving? No. I don't know what happened. All right, there we go. I think because I accidentally double clicked. So I can come here, hit blur, invert, and then with a brush, I can literally hit Shift X and paint in the blur so I don't get that line across the bottom. And you know, that's the cool thing about using ON1 versus some other software. Let's go back to Affinity Photo. Let me close this out. Hit done. My computer, I'm running it through its paces right now, or at least trying to. And as you can see, it jumped to another photo source and it started to align more of those center images. And again, this normally does not take this long. I'm not 100% sure why Affinity Photo is taking this long, but just keep that in mind. Your computer, it may take some time. So if you're going to PhotoStack, be prepared to wait around or merge your photo and then go do something else. You know, that could also be a thing. But either I am doing a really good job at explaining this, or no one has any questions or comments right now, which is cool. You know, if you don't have any, you don't have any. And that makes me happy that, you know, it seems as though I am explaining it quite well. So ON1 is still trying to save all 14 of those images. And like I said, this is a huge file. So be prepared to wait around. And then of course, I'm not using an SSD to save these images. This is all going on to a hard drive with a moving disk, which slows down the process just a little bit more. So my recommendation is if you're going to do this, at least use an SSD. That may speed things up. It looks like Affinity Photo is starting to get a little more resources back. And now it is going to go into the focus merge. So this is where it starts to build that mask that I was telling you you don't get access to. You can start to see the focused areas from each one of those 90 images start to stack on top of each other. And, you know, wonder if I can get this out of the way. Nope, doesn't let you move that. But this essentially is what your computer does, or what the software does, as it is stacking multiple images over time. And you can just kind of get a visual of, okay, this is how the software figures out what's in focus and what's not in focus. And I used a very, very shallow depth of field and stepping increment to create this image. And I specifically did this one because I think that's how the best product or end result is achieved. But I also did it because I wanted to show you the strain that goes on your system when you are building these. So, and then also, you know, just the management aspect of it all. As I showed you earlier, there was 1,000 photos in one folder. 1,000 photos in a folder is a lot. and it looks like ON1 has finished rendering in the background. So hopefully this speeds up a little bit more, because as I mentioned before, Affinity Photo typically doesn't take this long to merge an image. The image that is the flower that I just showed you not too long ago, that was merged in Affinity Photo this morning, and it took me maybe 2 minutes maximum for all of that. Not even, I would say maybe 60 seconds to really be like completely honest. But for some reason, this particular set of images is taking that much longer as it just merges and stacks. But I think you guys kind of get the gist of what Affinity Photo does here. So we'll come back when, oh, is it about to be done? No, it's making the negative focus plane. So we'll come back when that is done. So let's go ahead and hit focus bracketing examples. And I will show you some completed images. And then I also want to show you a near far example, so this is a completed image out of Affinity Photo of a budding flower. I didn't do any adjustments to it. I literally just saved it as a TIFF once it got done creating the final image. And as you can see, these are all shot natural light, or at least this one is natural light. And if I were to click on just this one image, you can see the focus is really like over here. There's no focus up there. But when, let me scroll back over. When I click on this particular image, you can see that the focus comes all the way through, and that's the purpose of the focus stack as a whole. This is actually one of my favorite images that I captured for this entire tutorial. I just, when I looked down, I was looking at this from a completely different angle. I was looking, I'm in the front of it, but I was looking down on it. So I didn't see the light as it was coming through this petal and coming down onto the stem here. I just didn't see that. But now looking at it on the photo, I can appreciate the fact that, how the light was actually interacting with the subject. And it just has this really nice glow to it. And I appreciate that, which is one of the reasons why I enjoy macro photography. And this was at a park. I wasn't anywhere special. It was actually a walking trail, but you can see that the focus is actually in the back area over here at this point. Again, I was using the automated feature for focus bracketing on my camera, and this is even more of that back portion in focus. And again, Affinity Photo rendered it like so. So you're probably wondering, well, how did ON1 Photo do? Well, ON1 Photo did this, which is essentially the same thing, but mind you, I only was able to use 14 images, and there is a total of 22. I'm sorry, 20 images, not 22. There's a total of 20 images, so I missed out using whatever the difference between, wow, I can't do basic math, 14 and 20, so 8 images. There we go. I can do math. All right. I missed out on using 8 images, and the images that I needed to be able to use would have produced a more sharp image. And let's go into the compare, because I think that that's a fair way of looking at it. And I really like these images because there's a lot of detail inside of it. even though my computer is crawling right now. I'm going to minimize this pane over here. And mind you, the first time that I ran the photo stack, ON1 actually crashed. Now, the reason why the ON1 photo is on the right and the Affinity Photo is on the left, you can tell which is which based off of this little piece right over here, which is a stem. When I was doing the focus stack in ON1, I decided to get rid of it because I wanted to make, I'm also going to go back and get rid of these spider webs here, just so I can make this a more, clean looking photo and background. Now, with that being said, you can see that there's more focus throughout this image. And we're really going to see that there's more detail back here. So I'm going to zoom in, and I have the lock, pan, and zoom, and you'll see there's just more detail in this image. I don't know why this one didn't zoom in. They're supposed to zoom together, but for whatever reason, doesn't want to zoom on that one. Probably because this is such a large file. That's the other problem with making focus stacks inside of ON1. You get really, really large files. But there you again, experiment with this for yourself. I promise you that there is a difference between the two. Will you be able to tell like here and there? No, probably not. If you were looking at both of these photos, this one is glowing more just because I did put an effect for glow on there. And that does take a little bit of the sharpness away from an image, but not so much that it is noteworthy. All right, let's go back to Affinity Photo and see. There we go. So obviously this is a much more detailed focus stack of this skateboard than I got out of ON1 when I merged it. The downside here is when you click on layers, it literally only gives you one layer to work with. What I would like ON1 or Affinity Photo to do is to give you the ability to edit the mask that they use to make this particular focus map. Because when you get the access to the mask, you can edit stuff, and maybe you don't need that, maybe you do. I don't know. I would personally prefer to have it. Now, as I mentioned before, I did not go all the way through the subject here, but it is what it is. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few more examples. Now, again, if you have questions, please drop them in the comment section, because what I want to show now is actually, and I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so I can navigate through these thousands of photos, because I got some folders down here at the bottom, because this is essentially how I work with the focus bracketed images. Now, this one actually came out pretty cool. That's a photo of my watch, and I'll open that here in a second. But what I want to show is the near far example. And what I have here are two images. All right, these aren't stacked yet. I'm going to stack them here in a second. The first image, this is literally right in front of each other, right? So this is where I think ON1 does a pretty good job. And I think this is what the creators wanted to do when they made this particular feature inside of ON1, where I have this stake for the barbed wire, which this is fake, by the way, but this little metal stake that's holding the barbed wire is right in front of this trench area. This is at the Army War College Heritage Experience Museum. They have a little walking path. So took a picture right here of the stake, And then I focused in the background and I took pictures to get all of this. So as you can see, this is in focus. That's kind of out of focus. It's blurry. This is blurry now, and this is out of focus. You can even see that the barbed wire is in focus. So what I'm going to do is click on both of these images and hit focus. Again, this time I'm not going to use the layered results. I am going to leave align photos checked, because when you uncheck it, you get that. Nobody wants that. So I'm just going to hit align photos because I want it to be aligned as much as possible. And if you look around on this particular stack, you start to see all of these like glowy looking things. And this is where your threshold and despackle really come into play. So you just got to mess around with it and maybe increase the threshold, because I want to do my best at getting, and maybe despackle more. Sensitivity. Yeah, this is a trial and error type of thing. I wish there was a good way of explaining how to get what you're looking for. Now, this is only 2 images, and what it's trying to do is find the difference between here and there, or the foreground and the background. But if this doesn't work the way that I want it to, I'm going to come back and try it a different way, because there is another way of focus stacking images inside of ON1. It's a lot more manual, but all right, so we're just going to go with that for now. I'm going to hit save, and this should go a lot faster. 1, because it's only 2 images, and then 2, because I'm not putting the layer mask on the images. It shouldn't take too much to put it together. But you will notice that there's, a little bit of disappointment when it comes to the final result here. But I'm going to show you how I would probably merge these 2 images as soon as it gets done. And just as a point of reference, what I am going to do is go back to Affinity Photo. I don't need to save that. I don't really care about the skateboard. We'll hit File, Focus Merge again, hit Add, and instead of Lego skateboard, let's go down to near far. I think it's near far example, yep. And just see the preview. Yeah, that's it. Hit open, and we'll hit OK. Now, I believe Affinity Photo is gonna like zip through this, and honestly, Affinity Photo is probably going to do a better job than ON1. Now, I'm not trying to take shots at ON1 because it is a feature that they offer, but as you can see, this is done for the exact same type of photo that I'm about to get, something without layered results. Affinity Photo completed that in less than 30 seconds, really less than 10. And as you can see, it did a pretty good job. Like, I don't have any of the challenges. Just pulling this down a little bit. If you look right in this area, I don't have any of this weird fringing going on. And all I did was drop some images inside of Affinity Photo. Now, obviously, this can use some work, and I could merge or drop this as a TIFF, but it needs to be a little bit brighter. So we'll just come here, brighten it up a tad bit, maybe control some of the highlights and even some of the shadows to build some contrast. Maybe I need my mids to come around there. You can come in here and manipulate that to your heart's content, right? But here we are inside of ON1 Photo Raw, and it is disappointing. As you can see, it just merged the two images into one stamped visible layer, and that's it. That's what you get. You can't do anything with that. All right. So I'm just going to hit done, and I'm going to show you what you can do, which this is how I would probably work with this is click both of those and then hit layers and click the two images that you want to merge, hit layers, and then hit OK. Now, both of these images should show up inside of ON1, obviously as layers, and it looks like the background is on top. What I want is to move the foreground image to the top. That's going to be this one. It brings it in focus. I will bring down my opacity on this one just so I can see, and I'll even bring down the exposure. I just want to see the difference between the two. Okay. And again, this is a very manual way of doing it. All right. So as you can see, the rod iron there is a lot larger in the front picture, or where it's actually focused. So what you'll have to do is play around with your transform tool, and the goal is to match this as close as possible. I don't know if it'll ever get completely perfect, but what I want to do is, let's go ahead, or better yet, we'll just hit transform over here, and we will drag this down. Let's hold shift. That doesn't do it. We're getting there. And we'll bring that in and bring this down just a little bit more. Bring this in. Looks like this needs to come up. And then maybe over to the right a little bit. Now, again, this is not the preferred way for obvious reasons, right? It just looks a little off, right? But I can go ahead and bring this all the way back up, and I have that piece in focus. So now what I can do is click on my masking tool, get the AI auto, and you already know what's going to happen. We're just going to go around. Oh, no. I want to keep the barbed wire because that's in focus, right? So we'll just go like this all the way around. We'll get rid of all that. And we'll get rid of all of this. Very, very slowly. Uh-oh. Don't want to get rid of the barbed wire, right? Only want to get rid of the things that I need to. And I am using a mouse for this. Hit Shift X, and we'll just come up here around the pole. Make that a little bit smaller, and try my best to just stay along this barbed wire looking thing. And we'll go one more time. All the way down. We'll get these pieces in there. All right, let's see what ON1 thinks about that. And that's okay. It's not okay, but I'm gonna roll with it. All right, so we'll hit done. And now I get this piece of metal in the foreground. I can reset the exposure so it blends in a lot better. But this is a lot easier to clean up, right? Because I could just come over here and I guess I'm on refine. Let's see what happens with that. Yeah, that worked out pretty good. I can live with the edit that made. Okay, that worked out pretty decent as well. And you know, you get this weird looking thing right there, but this is where you can come into your scale on the transform and just scale this up a little bit. Or I'm sorry, not the scale. You don't want the scale. You actually got to transform the whole thing. So again, this is not the way that I would recommend you use the focus stacking, but in a pinch, this can work. It works a lot better doing this in Photoshop when you have to merge layers or blend layers together, I should say. That's how I used to do it. And for that case, or for that matter, you could probably do this in Affinity Photo if you still need to have access to those things. But this isn't doing the worst job. It's also not doing the greatest. But it gives you an idea. All right. So we'll leave that to itself, hit OK, or hit done, and go on about our day with the focus stacking in ON1. Now, needless to say, Affinity Photo did a great job, and I highly recommend try using focus stacking software outside of ON1. This is when I did the third-party software application live stream. This is one of the reasons why you would go to third-party software. I'm not saying that ON1 is a terrible solution for focus stacking, because you can get some good focus stacked images, but it all depends on how you took the images. Whereas there's other software where you can get focus stacked images and it doesn't really matter how you took them. Case in point, I'm just going to show this one and then we'll stack one last image, because there's one image that I'm excited to see how it'll stack. I haven't done it yet. That way you kind of see real time. Now, obviously, this is my watch, and this would be more for a product shot. So if you're doing a product shot where you have to have some depth, then this is probably what you would want focus stacking for. And I think this is where it really shines. So this is, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. This is the final image inside of Affinity Photo. ON1 would never be able to achieve this. All right. Now, there's some imperfections in the watch because I didn't clean it off. I just set it down on my desk and I took photos, or took the photos, from front all the way to back. And as you can see, it did a really, really good job. And I mean, this is genuinely, with the exception of right down here, this got really weird, but it did a really good job. Affinity Photo did a good job at blending these things. And this is where you would want to have access to those masks so you can go in and fix things that are weird like that. All right. But overall, Affinity Photo did a good job with blending this because, let's face it, that's in the shadow. You may or may not have noticed it until I brought it up. But the detail in these little screws, and when I say these screws are little, I mean they are tiny. They're like the size of an ant. And you can see the detail in the rivet around the star screw there. So just something to keep in mind. And this was taken with a macro lens, 100 millimeter macro. So it does magnify it quite well. And you can even see some of the finishing in the bezeled ring around the outer portion of the watch. Even some of the scratches, like I didn't even realize until just now, but I can't even see these with my eye. I'm looking. I could barely see it with my eye. But here, it's, obviously very prominent. I definitely can't see that one, even though I know it's there now. But I can't see it. Or could barely see it, I should say. All right, let's go back to these folders. We're going to do the final merge, and then I'll take any questions if there are any, and if not, then that's fine. And actually, before I go to the final merge, let me just talk you through a few things here. So this one here was taken moving the manual focusing point. I manually moved the focus point from the front of the leaf all the way to the back of the leaf, just like so. All right. I did that all on my own. And this is 10 images. So let's just go ahead. I'm not going to render this all the way into ON1. I'm just going to bring this into the focus stacking module. And I did this because I realized that ON1 had a limitation, so I wanted to take photos that I would be able to stack inside of ON1. And as you can see, moving the autofocus point, right? I moved the autofocus point myself by tapping the screen here, tapping the screen there, tapping the screen there, and I got all the way up to 10 photos. And for some reason, this doesn't want to show me which photos it's using to actually create the stack, because it says 8 of 10. That's weird. ON1 does some strange things sometimes. But as you can see, it did a pretty good job. So if you do not have the autofocus or the focus stacking automation built into your camera, you can absolutely get some good products or end results just from using the autofocus and moving it around. There's some spackling, but as soon as I pulled up the sensitivity, the threshold, it goes back over there. And you can crop that out, whatever you want to do. The goal that I was really trying to get here was to photograph the texture with some side lighting. This was all with the window light. And you can see some of the texture in the paper that I use for the background, as well as just stuff like little dust particles on the leaf or whatever that is. That could be pollen, I don't know. Because I just pulled it out of my backyard off of weed. It wasn't like a tree. It was like a bush that has no business growing in my backyard, but not weed like look, it's a bad weed, right? And then this is just a second demonstration of moving that focus point. Now, this is an example of moving the focus ring manually. Now, here I took 17 photos, so I'm going to have to stop short just so I can stack these. And as you can see, this gives me a total of 14 images. So when I hit focus stack, Hopefully this will merge well. I was not using the focusing rail either. This is just me manually moving the focus ring on my lens. This is something that you can do yourself, but there are 14 images that it's trying to merge, and that's what it was taking so long there. And it looks like it kicked out a few. So I'm just going to throw these back in just to see what, well, that one does not want to cooperate. Oh, it kicked out all of these. That's why there's not a depth of field back there. There we go. Now it's starting to go back. And you can see as I click these bubbles, it starts to build more and more of the image all the way until I get to the last image, which I got one more. And you know, that's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. I'll hit some despeckling here, or maybe even some threshold. And no, wonder what sensitivity will do. Sensitivity cleans it up a little bit if I bring back the threshold. And maybe I don't want this to be max. Maybe, so this is actually a really good example to show you what happens when you pull the depth of field from the right. It brings this down, the depth of field towards the bottom of your image, as you can see. And I can pull this all the way until it gets down to here. And that could be a way of recovering. Like if you got some speckled issues like I do in this one, it's going to go, there we go. Like I do in this one, and you're like, man, I guess I don't really need this part of the image. I can live without it. Then just pull your depth of field. Like I had some issues in the bottom section here, right? I could easily just crop that as well, but maybe you don't want to crop it because you don't want to lose your pixels. Then you can do something like this, and then really just focus on despeckling or cleaning up the areas where you have a little bit more control over how clean or not clean you can make those areas, right? So by pulling my threshold down, it looks like I got some of that cleaned up. I can pull my sensitivity up. And it looks like it did a pretty decent job. All right. You really don't know how good of a job it does until you hit save, but I'm not going to do that with this one. I just want to show you, you can merge photos using manual focusing. So don't think you have to use auto focusing only. But the last photo that I want to merge, and I'm going to actually do this first inside of Affinity Photo just because I think it'll go faster and I don't want ON1 to be taking up resources. But this is that same leaf, and I used the focus, the automated focusing, and you know, one image could absolutely look really, really nice, right? This is a really cool macro shot. This is just salt, some pepper flake, and then the green leaf. I just like the way that the colors looked, and you know, you can really modify these colors. But what I want to do is have a more in-depth photo. So I'm just going to minimize this, come back to Affinity Photo. We can close this one out because I'm not going to do anything with that. Hit File, go to Focus Merge, Add, navigate to those folders now, or at least that folder, I should say. Okay, my salt, pepper, and then I'm just going to grab all of these images. I don't remember exactly how many I put this one for. 110. Okay, so you are about to witness 110 images getting merged inside of Affinity Photo. So I'm going to hit OK and let Affinity Photo do its thing with the auto aligning and all of that. And then I'll be back once that's done. So you can see it cycling through some of the images there. And for what it's worth, you will likely have to crop your images just because as the focusing plane moves, you are going to lose some of the edges on your images. This is okay. This is normal. It's not that big of a deal. Just something you should be aware of. When it does happen, however, you should really, really think about how you compose your image to the point that maybe you just photograph something a little bit wider than you normally would. So when it crops in, it doesn't affect your overall image. But just food for thought. Food for thought. It's almost done here. Again, the longest part of the photo merge is aligning the photos, and that's always a challenge. So thankfully there's software that does that portion for us, because without the software, I think it would be extremely hard. Personally, I think it would be. Okay, now it's going to go through making the actual focus stack, which we've seen many times before. I'm going to just resize this window a bit. Even though it doesn't resize our preview. Yep, this is the waiting game of ON1 Photo Raw, or really just photo editing and creating focus stacks. It'd be nice if this was faster, but unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way. It just doesn't. Okay. And like I said, this is 110 images, and it was some very, very small things. So there's some fine detail involved with this one, but I am a little excited to see how this one comes out, because I did not merge this one. So I would like to see what happens with the final merge, since, you know, all the other ones up until this point, minus the skateboard, I guess, I have not, or I actually practiced merging those together. But this particular one, I have not merged. all the other ones I practiced, so I knew exactly what was going to happen. This one, I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen. And that's okay, because you are going along with me on a journey to see something that I have no idea what is going to be seen. I wish it were a little bit faster. But again, if there's any questions on photo merging or focus stacking, please drop them in the comment section. Doesn't matter if you're on the live stream or if you're watching this as a replay or anything of the sort. Just, let me know what your questions are, because I may be able to answer them. And if I can't, I will find someone who can and then just regurgitate their answer to you. So that way you can sleep soundly at night knowing your photo questions were answered. But man, this really takes some time. Now, I think it speeds up towards the end here. I think. I could be wrong. And if you make your increments a lot larger, I think it makes it a little bit easier for the focus stack merge to kick in. And I think this is where it's really starting to put the photos together. And this part doesn't take as long as the tone map portion, because I think once it has the tone map, it's like, all right, just plug in where the color pixels are and make an image. But what's really cool here is it is starting to merge very slowly. I know this is as entertaining as watching paint dry or just doing boring stuff like breathing. But it's necessary. This has to happen. It's the only way that the merge can be done, is if we wait and be patient. And again, this is 110 photos. So you think about putting 110 20 megabyte photos together into one image. And that's essentially what this is. So it takes a little bit of time. I wonder what 110. I'm going to do the math. I should probably be able to do this in my head, but I don't want to do it in my head. So this is a 2,200 megabyte photo, which really turns into 2 gigs, right? 2.2 gigs. And that's how big this photo is. Just put that into perspective. Or at least, let me rephrase. 2,200 megabytes. 2 gigabytes of information is what's being used to create this photo. The photo itself may not actually be that big. The photo will probably come out to be somewhere around maybe 500 megabytes. The TIFF, if that. Because, it's still going to be a little compressed. It's almost there, and it looks good. I mean, it looks like it looks like I expected it to be. And, we'll be able to put this. I'm actually going to save this out as a TIFF because I want to be able to edit this photo inside of ON1 and manipulate the colors a little bit. So now Affinity Photo is done with it. Let me go. I just want to move this back into the middle and hit Command 0. So yeah, that looks amazing all of the detail, with the exception of right here. Apparently, I did not focus far enough down in the photo, but everywhere else on the photo, I mean, there's all this detail back up here. There's all this, well, no detail down here, but you can really like zoom in and see, you know, where the detail is across this photo. You can see on the pepper flakes just the ridges, and that's really cool. The ridges on this pepper flake. And then, I mean, this is salt. You don't really see salt like this. So even if I were to crop in on this image, it would still be really, really cool, which gets rid of this blurry portion down here. So yeah, there you have it. So in order to save this out, I'm going to hit File, Export, and I'm going to leave it as a TIFF with 16-bit information. And, oh, okay, this is only 97 megabits, or megabytes. So hit Export, and, yeah, Affinity Photo Export. Or 110 image stack, and then I'm just going to hit save. So now I have this saved, and then I'm also going to save this as an Affinity project, because I may want to come back in here and do some stuff inside of Affinity. And instead of Garmin watch, I want to go with salt and pepper. So that way, you know, I have access to that. And I wonder how big this project is. Let me take a looky look. Where is that? There it is. And it's going to be down here at the bottom. Command I. I'll go ahead and pull this over so I can share it with you. So it's only 136 megabytes for this entire project. And then the TIFF, you've seen that was 97. So this is only a little bit larger than the TIFF file. But I retained the information that I need to come back in here and edit this. So if I go over to ON1, and we will go back into the browse. Down here, I should have, all right, let me just close out the folder and then come back into it to reload the images. I should have the version from ON1, or I'm sorry, from Affinity inside of my folders here in ON1, and then I can edit that to my heart's content. Should have a TIFF file somewhere in here. Interesting. Maybe I didn't save the TIFF file to this location. So we'll go back to Affinity Photo, File, Export, export it yet again. Oh, I saved it to the Garmin watch folder. That's no bueno. Make sure you choose the right folders. There we go. Affinity 110 stack. And now it is exporting to the correct folder. So I should see it pop up in here at some point. I think it normally comes up here to the front. Oh, technology. It's so much fun. But when it doesn't work, it's so annoying. Well, I see it in my actual folder. Oh, there it is. Just took a little bit of time for it to load up inside of Affinity, or ON1. I keep getting these things mixed up. But, so now I can you know, literally just come over here, and I would probably go with a color adjustment, and maybe bring the greens down, desaturate them just a tad, pull up on the range of those, and then come over here to the reds, maybe saturate those just a little bit, make those darker reds, come to the oranges, really saturate those. And this is just my personal preference. Probably pull these more into the orange tonal range, brighten them up just a tad, maybe not too bright, just a little bit. Then come to the yellows, get that yellow, some more pop in there. Bring down the, make those a little contrasty. And then I'll probably just throw in some dynamic contrast, because why not? And that's way too much, crunches up the image. Let's try a preset of soft, and maybe even back it down a little bit. And then the last one is a color enhancer. And the only reason I want this is so I can boost the vibrance of the entire image. And I think I'll even throw this underneath the dynamic contrast. And last but absolutely not least, I will crop this image. I'm using my full sensor aspect ratio, so I'll bring it like so, and probably do something like that, and hit apply. And now I have this really awesome photo stacked image, something, and it is a little dark now that I look at it. So let's open up some of these shadows. Nope, that's too much. Let me try AI Auto. Let's see what happens there. And we'll just back down AI Auto. Easy there, AI. Easy. Boom. There you have it. And maybe the dynamic contrast is too much. No. I can live with it. So there you have it. Let's go back to here, and I want to say thank you to everyone who hung out during the live stream. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop it in the comment section below. If you're looking to get ON1 Photo Raw, there is an affiliate link at no extra cost to you. If you purchase from that link, the channel does get a little bit of a commission. It helps us continue to grow. If that's something you're interested in doing, then I would greatly appreciate it. And I also am excited. We're almost at 500 subscribers on this channel, which is a huge, huge blessing. And thank you to everyone who subscribes, and to all the subscribers that continue to support just through watching videos, commenting, and sharing. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Really do. Thank you so much. So with that being said, until the next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.